Here with you. Oh, Jesus. I'm going to fix my lighting so I look a little bit cuter. Maybe. How's that?
Actually, the lighting looks great.
Thank you. And the sound? Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, the sound sounds great. It's not the first time people have had mic problems, so it's all good.
Thank you, Kayla, for your reassurance. I appreciate it. Kayla, remind me the name of your show and let me know if I need to know anything before we get started, or are we already started?
Yeah, it's all good. So it's called Reinvented. So basically, I just take like a bunch of questions, and they're pretty much random questions, just to kind of get to know like the person behind. So that's basically all there is to it. If there's any questions you have, you can ask questions too. Sometimes I have like a list of questions. I'll generate random questions that come to my head too. So
cool.
All right.
And so I'll tell you, while I'm not going to attempt to hijack your entire interview in the name of promotion, I am interested in sharing a little bit about the musical that I created, and you might hear me talk about, for me, one of my big reinventions as a person is going from a clergy person, teacher, into being a playwright, songwriter, and that's sort of my reinvention. And I might even want to talk a little bit about how some of the fictional characters I create try to be reinvented. We'll see. But whatever seems natural to you, and I'm also happy to follow your lead as much as I can.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want, we can also start it out with that too. So like people get to know, and when I do end up posting this, people will know about your musical. If you want, you can start out with that.
Yeah.
That way I don't forget by any chance either.
All good. And the other thing I should mention, while your show is not a musical podcast per se, if you're at all interested in hearing me sing a little something from the show, I'm glad to throw you a little live music at some point in the interview. If that feels awkward or doesn't fit, no hard feelings. Happy to share.
I do have to say, is it like copyrighted? Because like when I post on YouTube, it might try to copyright it and then won't post the episode. So just like keep that aware too.
Yeah. So
I've been having that recently with YouTube. So
interesting.
Thanks.
No, I'm not far enough along that I'm dealing with that issue.
Okay. Just to put that out there, it might try to block it because it's been doing that with like my other podcasts, or just blocking stuff for no reason. So
not cool. All right. Well, let's go. I'm ready.
All right. So for starters, if you want to talk a little bit about your musicals, that way I don't forget any grounds.
Yeah, that sounds cool, Kayla.
Yeah. So like, what are some things you want to like say about it?
Oh, are we rolling?
Yeah. I'm someone who goes really fast. I've learned that about myself.
Terrific. Yeah, hey, glad to be here, Kayla. So my musical is called Life Review, the Hospice Musical. It's a musical comedy I created over the last, now 10 years, in collaboration with several composer friends. The musical is inspired by real-life experiences I lived through as a chaplain. And I know when you and I talk a little bit more about my unusual professional journey, you'll hear that one of my reinventions was going from music teacher to cantor in a synagogue to chaplain working hospice care, and then eventually playwright and songwriter. So this was my first musical. I'm really excited about it. And it's a musical comedy, so surprisingly funny, despite the topic matter of hospice care. And if people want to learn more, we have a great website, lifereviewmusical.com, where you can see a trailer video featuring some live footage from a recent performance pre-COVID. And I'm real active on Instagram at lifereviewmusical. And I imagine Kayla could throw up those links. No, don't throw up any links, Kayla. Maybe you can post those links later on.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely want to send me any links to post to. I can put. I have Reinvented has an Instagram page, awesome. And as I have my own like business page as well. So
Fantastic. So I'll be sure to share those with you and your listeners. Um, yeah, and I guess in terms of I'm going to use your show name, Reinvented, and just mention that one of the unique things about the journey of this little musical that could is we were churning along, doing great, leading right up to COVID. We had a standing room only performance that was well received in my local community here in Maryland, and then COVID hit. Right, so like so many live performers, the question was: do you take your show and put it in a drawer, or do you try to reinvent it? So I was encouraged by a creative coach to take that ensemble show and smush it down so I could perform it from this very basement studio. I have a couple of black curtains that I put against the wall, and it looks like a mini theater. And during the course of the COVID pandemic, I performed it about a dozen times for all kinds of venues, organizations. And now that live theater is back in action, I've performed the one-man show at Asheville Fringe Festival recently. That was awesome. And now I'm arranging a mini tour in both Chicago and Boston. But anyone who's listening, who's interested, can get in touch with me. Send me a message on Instagram, or there's a contact form on the website. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and do you have like what places maybe you'll be going to in Chicago? Yeah, well,
Right,
like
so we're just beginning
maybe.
plans. No big venues just yet. Right now, I'm in the planting seeds. You know, I'm doing house shows. I'm also making appearances at synagogues, at community centers, and so forth. But those small performances are great places to invite people like artistic directors and programming directors for larger venues, with the hope that they like the show and want to bring it to their places. So if you're listening today and you love musical theater, check out my my website, and if you find it interesting, send me a message. Maybe we can connect. I'd love to talk.
Okay. Let's see. What do you think people misunderstand most about you?
Oh my God, great question, Kayla. I love you already. Okay, so I call myself a sad clown. And I think because I'm a funny person and I make a lot of jokes, some people think I'm a fool. I'm actually a very smart fellow, but the humor often is a way I handle anxiety or diffuse social discomfort, but it doesn't mean I'm stupid.
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of people because I use my humor just to deflect like anything. I'm like, that's how I'm gonna deal with it. So I feel like I think that happens to like everyone who just uses like humor. Like, are you okay? I'm like, yep, fine, just making a joke.
That's right. Yeah, and with the understanding that humor, like, it is not uncommon to discover that funny people and comedians of every type, like a lot of us, deal with our various mental health issues. And we know, unfortunately, there have been a lot of famous comedian entertainers who, upon their after their death, we, the general public, discover that they were like really troubled souls. I was just talking with a colleague who, as a young woman, worked with Robin Williams. And I said, I understand in real life he was pretty intense and funny, but also kind of manic in an unsettling way. And she said, yeah, he was the most brilliant performer I ever met, and he couldn't turn it off. Now that to me sounds painful, and that's sort of next level. So I can like turn off silly Ben as like, you know, when I'm a music teacher, sometimes I can be silly to kids, but if they get all like worked up, I'm like, all right, kids, now I'm serious. I think if you can't like code switch with comedy on off, it can get you in trouble. I don't know. Can you relate to that, Kayla?
Well, I have like a little sister, so sometimes, you know, so like since I just I kind of like left, she kind of likes to attach now. So like I maybe not so much attached, but she definitely like misses having someone around.
Sure.
So she'll get mad if I don't want to like play, or she'll be like, I said, but I'll play in a minute. Like I have to like sometimes I like can turn myself into like what seems like a 5-year-old. like, the level of 5-year-old of like, how they want to play and but then
Right.
sometimes I can turn it like be more like a serious adult.
Mm-hmm.
Just it kind of depends on I think who you're around. Like if you're like and the situation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the other thing, if you lean heavily into comedy as a way to communicate with the world, you also have to accept, or I should say, I have learned to accept. You don't have to do anything. I have learned to accept that some will enjoy the show, so to speak, enjoy the jokes, and some will be like totally not amused. I had an experience recently, Kayla, where I taught for 2 years in middle school. I'm a music teacher, among other things. And I did 2 years in this middle school. Let me tell you, 12-year-olds do not find me funny. They're so embarrassed by me because I'm like a goofball. I make jokes, whatever. Like, and my wife said to me, like, Ben, middle school is not your audience. Like, grown-ups, especially old people, find me hilarious. Little kids eat my ish up. Like, they think I'm so funny when I do silly things during music class. Middle school kids, not my audience. So now I know. I won't do any more middle school gigs.
Well, even with my little sister, I like to make fun of her sometimes because she does those things where she's like, she'll pretend to be mad when she's not. I'm like, oh, it's the Hulk, huh?
Oh, that's funny.
And
How
she's
old's your
like,
little sister, Kayla?
she's 5. So, but she
Oh,
does
yeah.
this thing like it looks like her veins popping out of her head. She tries to be mad, and I'm like, oh,
Wow.
the Hulk is back.
Well,
And then she starts laughing as she pretends to smash around. But like I've noticed, because I work as a comedian. Like even though I don't post it all the time, and people are always, we don't post it, and I'm like, well, because I don't want to. I'm like, I don't post everything, but I've learned, like also creating content and my podcast, you don't have to post everything that you're doing.
sure.
Just for people to realize like stuff goes on behind the scenes of when you're not posting. I'm
Yep.
like, there's a lot I'm doing. I'm like, but I would like post some jokes and people are like, well, you shouldn't joke about that. I'm like, but I'm joking about it because I went through it.
Sure. Sure.
Like,
And I mean, like, part of what's fun about humor, Kayla, for me, is you can dance around the discomfort. I mean, I started this little part of our chat talking about how I use humor in uncomfortable moments or social situations. So in my musical, I use a lot of humor to deal with death, dying, aging. I mean, I have one song that's not in the short play, but it's in the full length play. That's 3 patients lusting after the care team. Anyone who's ever worked in elder care, nursing homes, they know that older people get horny too. It's like one of the most powerful urges, along with hunger and thirst, is that other kind of thirst, right? So I wrote a song about it, and it's pretty raunchy, and it's very funny. It made some people a little bit uncomfortable, and that's exactly the point. Because no one wants to hear like a clinician. I mean, maybe at a conference, a clinician might give a talk about like sexuality in elder care, right? But a lot of people will just be like kind of uncomfortable. But if we do a funny song and we laugh about it, we can engage with a topic that's real life. Even my opening number, which is called Spoiler Alert, the punchline is everybody dies in the end. So if I'm like, everybody here in the theater is mortal and you're all facing your doom someday, everyone would be like, this is a bummer. And like, they wouldn't be into it. But if we laugh, ha ha ha, we're all going to die. Then I've broken the ice, and then I can also access the deeper stuff. I wonder, Kayla, when you're like dealing with your sister and she's playing that angry character, is there also like a non-comic version of that angry character that you're a little bit anxious that you're seeing and a little worried about?
well, she does this like so sometimes she is like it starts out as like anger, right? Like, like someone told her no and she's 5, so, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't like being told no. But but like sometimes I have to do something to make her laugh. Like she'll be like,
Yeah.
I'm mad. I said, "Oh, you're mad? Does that mean you want tickles?" And she's like, "No tickles." And then you start chasing her around, and she's like, "Go." She'll start
Hilarity
laughing.
ensues.
I was like, "That is how we make you laugh."
Well, I like how you stay engaged with her and you don't like get pulled into her drama or her nonsense. Because I bet you there are adults who react to that where they're like, "Oh no, why are you mad?" Which puts all the power in her.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I also feel like when people do that with kids, it's like you can't expect them to like always know like why they're mad. Like, you told them no. It's like they don't really understand, well, like, why is it no? Why is that bad?
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes I'll have like that conversation with her. I said, "Oh, are you mad about something?" And she'll go, "Oh, I miss you. I want to play with you." I said, "Oh, is that what you want?" I was like, "You give me a minute."
Yeah.
Because then there are those times it's like she'll come up and you're like, "Okay, give me a minute." It's like, but she'll like keep getting up in your face,
Mm.
like, Kayla, Kayla. It's like, okay, back up a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But like some people would react to that, like, no, she doesn't. She doesn't want to hang out right now. It's like, but and yell at them, and it's like I don't like when people do that, especially when random strangers try to do that to her. Because I'm like, no, like I just don't need. I'm like, I just want her to back up a minute.
Yeah.
Like that's what I really want. I'm like, just for a minute, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's super important whether you're a teacher or a big sister to help our younger friends deal with that basic frustration, right? Because sometimes we get what we want right away, but most of the time we don't. And not to be all high and mighty, but that's kind of like one of the meta projects of teachers beyond the specific things that we teach is to kind of how to get along and take our turns. And, they all want to go first. But when there's 18 kids, most of them won't go first. You know what I mean? And that can be hard.
Well, yeah, and especially I always try to like teach her. I'm like, well, don't take disrespect from anyone, regardless if it's an older adult. I'm like, if they're gonna be disrespectful, say something, and if they don't like it, too bad. I'm like, I don't expect her to understand that because she's 5. Like, I don't expect her to be like talking, with some attitude, but
Sure. But we do teach kids, even in kindergarten and first grade, whichever grade she's in, basics in polite behavior. I was having this conversation with my wife. My kid is great, and she's also a middle school kid. And a friend recently observed that the difference between kindness and assholery is often please and thank you. Those 3
well,
words.
yeah.
Please, thank you. So if you use please and thank you, you quickly move from the land of assholery to the land of kindness. And if you're a kind person, but you forget to say please and thank you, you very quickly might move to the land of assholery without even realizing it. And so, like, my students and my own daughter, I wouldn't use that term, but I would say, let's be kind or mindful of how we talk to one another. And it's relentless, especially because, to name a thing, there are a lot of people out there in the general public, certainly a lot of politicians these days, who flex how rude and mean they are. And I'm not impressed. And I try to be sort of as kind as I can as a force in that other direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I even like I don't tell my little sister this, but like even when I go to work, like for my day job, like I try to keep it like people always ask me like why I don't seem as professional like outside of work, maybe like not when I'm like doing podcast or anything, but like at work, I'm like I will, like not disrespect, but I will like I will say something in a professional manner of like don't say that to me. I'm the one, helping you in like customer service. I'm like, I'm the one servicing you. You don't need to be disrespectful. I was like, but I'll do it in a professional way and then but it's also different from how I'm outside of work. So,
Yeah, I hear that.
and like that's one thing I think people need to realize, and especially even in service industry, it's like you don't need to be disrespectful to workers, regardless.
I want to say a big amen to that. Um, you know, one of the fun things about writing Life Review is I got to put some unique heroes on stage. Our main hero is a chaplain who we've never seen in a musical before, and that's like a total hero who catches all kinds of challenging behavior in real life. His like friend slash source of wisdom is a nurse, not the doctor, but the nurse who knows best. And I think that was a certain choice. Like there are doctors who exist in hospice care, but the real heroes in my mind are the nurses in terms of how much hands-on care they give. And I bring that up because like the medical profession, especially in elder care, holy moly, the people who care for our aging parents and grandparents, a lot of them who do the hardest work get paid the least. Like the GNAs, the people who change the clothes and the bed linens, that is physically demanding work because they're also sometimes the people who have to move bodies and move furniture in order to change linens and to change clothes. And those people are often the ones who are the least credentialed and therefore paid the least. But that doesn't mean they should be ever disrespected. In fact, I would, as expensive as medical care is, I wish we as a society could find a way to better pay those amazing helping hands who do the, let's call it the dirty work of, you know, cleaning the schools, the janitors, or cleaning the medical waste, the GNAs, and so forth. So we should always remember to be kind and grateful to them.
Yeah, I even had friends in high school. So we went to we did like a charter school and then our home high school, and they were in the medical program. So
Cool.
I believe what it is, like it's CN or something like that. They're, so they were still in high school, so they weren't like registered nurses or anything, but
Maybe a
they,
CNA, which is like a
yeah,
step down
I
from
think
an
that's what it
RN.
was. I had to think about that. I'm like, CN
Yeah,
doesn't sound right. I'm like, there's one letter I'm
CNA
missing there.
is one of the rungs of nursedom.
But even I think they worked at like an elderly care home, I believe,
Hmm.
because it was only like down the road from where we went to school.
Okay.
But they ended like they would tell me like some crazy stories with like the some of the residents, like some of them kind of like scared them a little bit. Like I was like, I don't know how you guys can do that.
Yeah, it's challenging work to be sure. I I remember when I interviewed to be to be a chaplain, Kayla, you gotta get training kind of similar to a social worker, but different because it has sort of a religious bent. But I did it for 4 years running, and the first year of the program, I had to interview, and it happened to be situated at a residential hospice. So this is a place where people move at the end of their life and to get the care and comfort as they deal with the end of life process, the dying process. And I remember the rabbi who ran the program, he said, Ben, how comfortable are you with death and dying? And I was like, pretty comfortable. And he said, okay, because in a hospice, there's a lot of dying. And I actually stole that joke and I put it in my play. But like, you have to be very comfortable. Just like if you're going to be a nurse in an ER, you got to be very comfortable with gory, bodies that have been broken in shootings and stabbings and car crashes. And if you're squeamish, you cannot do that job. End of story, right? So I happen to be super comfortable with death and dying, with sickness and illness, which makes me well suited to be a chaplain in elder care settings. And I imagine your friends had to become comfortable with that, or they just stuck it out and moved on. I don't know. But like, I think it's reassuring. I'm going to quote my smart wife here, who's trained as a guidance counselor, and she likes to say there's a job for everyone. Sometimes it takes a while to find it, but there's a job for everyone. Meaning, like, I happen to have these skills that I'm good at visiting with older people and sick people, so I can do that. I also happen to be good at guitar, and I enjoy the presence of little kids. So right now, I teach little kid music at an elementary school. I know I have a friend who's like a businessman in the tree industry, and he's like, little kids are so annoying. I could never do your job. And I'm like, and that's why you work in the tree industry, and I work with kids.
Yeah, like even my dad, so like he ended up in the hospital, right? And I remember they had like CNAs and they obviously had their like RNAs after, like even after a surgery, because he was in the hospital for like 3 weeks after, which like obviously for him sucked. But even there were times like I would think back to my friends because I'm like I don't know how they would deal with this because I'm like I could never do anything medical because I do not like blood. I don't like having my blood drawn. I was the
Yeah.
kid running away getting shots.
Hmm.
I would full on try to book it. I'm like that's never. I'm like I could never. But like even I would. My dad, like I think the second day he was in there, like I think it was his first full day, like post surgery. But they came into the room as I'm visiting with him, and they tell him we got to remove your catheter, and he's so out of it. I told him I was like, "Oh, I'm out of here," and he
Yeah.
goes, "They're like, what? You don't want to see that?" I'm like, "Nope, seen too many Impractical Jokers to know what that is."
Hmm.
I'm like, but he's like so out of it. He's like, he doesn't really know what they're talking about. I was like, "Yep, they're removing it from here." No, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, you just see his face change. I was like,
Yeah.
"Yep,
There's
that's
a
how I'm
lot
gonna
of
deal with
moments
that."
of I want to move us along because, like many fellas, that area is a sensitive one, even in the
Yes.
imagination. But that said, you got to know your spots and also know when to leave the room. And it sounds like you chose to leave at a good time. And
Yeah.
kudos to you for returning to be at your father's side when it was a more comfortable moment.
Well, and even like he had like a few weeks later he had to get his blood drawn. I said, I'm not watching that. I'm like, I'm not doing that again because I did that. I did that a while ago. One time, I'm like, I'm not doing that again. That was not fun to watch because I don't like seeing needles like touch
Hmm.
people's skins. Ugh.
Yeah, and let me just name like that whole fear thing. It's not rational, but it is powerful. And even though it's not rational or logical, it is very real to the person who feels it. So, like, my wife today, she gave blood. Good for her. I used to be a blood donor. I started when I was 17. I happen to be 43 now, but like, I was a gallon club member, meaning I think that's 16 pints, many, like two or three times over. And then at some point in my late 20s or early 30s, I fainted. I don't know if it was a mental thing or if I was just like a little bit dehydrated that day, but it kind of flipped a switch to me for me. And then I was like, I can't do it anymore. And looking at the fact that I literally gave blood at least, God, 30, 40 times, 50, like a ton of times with no incident, and then all of a sudden I can't, that's kind of interesting, right? But I'm going to allow myself to be civically minded in other areas that don't make me pass out and accept that, like, I've moved on.
Yeah, that's definitely like something there. Okay, let's see.
Let's
What's
move
your
on.
favorite childhood memory?
Oh, I'm going to go with um, these sort of epic music moments in my Jewish summer camp and my synagogue Hebrew school. That would be like the Sunday school. Um, I always loved to sing as a kid, and at my summer camp, they had this thing modeled on on Israel's Song Festival. The term is Zimriya Song Festival, and each age group learned a song. And for the big show, we had special T-shirts, matching colors, and the song leader was on their guitar or keyboard, whatever. But like at the local college field house, 1,000 people or more, and it felt like we were part of a rock show, even though, um, looking back on it from my 43-year-old vantage point, probably wasn't actually like a rock show, but it felt super exciting. Um, and then even the like step down, less tada version of same at my local synagogue which might have been a class of 10 instead of a unit of 100 kids singing at once. But it was still exciting to learn the song and stand up and then have everyone in the community clap at the end. I didn't know at the time, but I was a budding performer, right? You see, got the guitar in the background, and to this day I love to sing in big groups or on my own. And it turned out I would grow to be an adult who loved to sing in all kinds of settings, and I became a music teacher and a song leader. So I've been at a summer camp now and run big sing-alongs and big shows, done music assemblies with my students where I've got a room of several hundred kids singing along. And I know for them, those little 5-year-olds in the room, I'm trying to provide some sort of peak experience for their memories.
Yeah, I think like I did. They would like I think outdoor school. Like I don't know if they still like do outdoor schools anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember we had to do one where we like I think of the last 2 days they did like performances, and I forget what ours like. I think they gave us like a thing to do or something like that, or like a basis of what to do.
Yeah.
And it was like ours and our two like leads we did What Does the Fox Say, where we would run across the stage. Like it was so random. Like it was fun, but it was like I was someone who was also like just very shy as a kid. I didn't really know how to interact with people. I'm still not like the greatest with like the interaction piece sometimes. Like, but because sometimes like someone will say something, I'm just like, yeah, thanks. Like, it sounds like I'm being mean, but it's like I'm like I don't know how to react to that sometimes. But like it was a lot of fun just running across. Like it was a little stage too. It wasn't anything like seriously. It was like probably made out of like cardboard, but there was a little ramp part, and I was the one who like ran up there. Like it was fun.
Even though you were a shy kid, being part of the show was exciting and important.
Yeah, it was, and also it was more of like this. Like I loved performing, but like a lot of people were like, "Oh, you're so quiet. Like you're not." Like they wouldn't give me bigger pieces, and like because I also started to realize like, and as I became an adult, I started to realize like some of the problems people were like phasing off for being too quiet, or something's probably a little more wrong here. Like there are times like my voice won't project the way it's supposed to. Like if you're trying to maybe not yell at someone, but you're trying to be more assertive, my voice sometimes like you're like trying to say something and it's like, oh, that's like my voice will crack for no reason. Like I know voices crack a lot, but like sometimes that's what happens, and it's like that's a bigger problem in itself, and not from me just being quiet. But I always thought growing up that's what that was. So.
Well, even if it wasn't your peak experience, sometimes, and now I'm speaking on behalf of putting the hat of music teacher on my head. And this is good because, like, we had our back to school 2 hours the other day. I haven't really begun my music lessons, so thank you for reminding me this. That music class isn't just about, like, the razzle-dazzle kids giving them a chance to have a solo and a chance at the spotlight. Maybe if I can do that for them, cool, and I will encourage my high flyers who dance and sing and act beautifully, like tell their parents, put them on stage, tell the kids you're awesome, keep going. I think it's equally important, Kayla, you're reminding me that the kids who are a little shy and awkward, just try to help them in different ways to explore and perform a little bit so they can find that poise in themselves. You gave the example of voice, like you don't have to be an actor to need to be able to speak with some confidence, or rather to benefit from speaking with confidence. And sounds like you're finding your voice as a young adult woman. And I'm a cisgender man here, so I can't speak with knowledge of being a woman, but I know that for many female friends, there's all kinds of bonus complications about speaking in front of others because of all kinds of projections onto what a woman speaking up means.
Yeah, and then even like I think I started to kind of realize and like more of find my voice when I started like actually working, like, and not so much like like business wise, because I started running my fashion brand when I was like 17, and like I feel like it was okay.
Kayla, I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you and say, are you kind of a girl boss on the DL? Like, am I
Yeah,
talking to a
I
major
don't tell people
internet
like
tycoon?
yeah, so I can like I okay, so I started like creating content probably around the same time roughly. Like
Okay.
actually like creating like fun content like it some of it was like I feel like maybe not like stupid, but it was just like one of those things that's not really interesting or like or in I don't know the word I'm looking for there, but like I started like doing that when I was 17, like because I really like for some reason like I was like YouTube, like creating YouTube videos, like I really wanted to do that, and I think like it was roughly about that same time I started like because I did like my friends they went to the same charter high school I did. They were in a different program, but I did like the fashion program
Oh,
because
cool.
I wanted some different like because I'm like obviously I'm not doing anything medical dental, like I'm not gonna do that,
Yeah, we covered them. We already crossed those off
like
the list.
so, and then there was like engineering, which I never saw myself doing anything with like mechanical engineering because like for one I don't know anything about cars. I don't, even if I had a car today I wouldn't know how to fix it. I wouldn't know anything mechanical. And then I think because I was originally going to do like their entrepreneurship program. It was like called like Change Lab or something like that. But I was like, they had a fashion program, and I always wanted a sewing machine when I was little. Like, I wanted to learn how to sew, and no one would buy me a sewing machine because they're like, you don't know how. I'm like, well, how am I going to learn if you don't buy me one or don't? I'm like, how am I going to learn? I'm like,
Serious.
and
I
I
agree
always
with
had all
young Kayla. Please tell me this has a happy ending and you now have a sewing machine, please.
yeah, I do have a sewing machine now. Like I bought myself one. So like
Hooray.
I think when I was 12 I had asked for a sewing machine. No one would buy one because they're like, you don't know how to sew. And then I don't remember when I got my first one. I know I got it for like my birthday or Christmas one year. Like when I was still in high school and I was so excited because like my grandma had bought me one. I was like, yay, I got a sewing machine. That someone bought me one. And then I think because I had gotten rid of that one because it was like it started to kind of break down a little bit. But like it was like really tiny. But I was like, I want to start making clothes and making, fun clothes that, people will wear. So that's inevitably kind of where I started my fashion brand. And obviously it took some tanks like throughout the years. I dealt with a lot of like depression, anxiety, and I overworked myself too much. So that put me in like a mental pause of like just becoming super overwhelmed,
Hmm.
and I wasn't happy with what I was creating. So I kind of left my fashion brand behind. I said, okay, like if I feel like I'm back to some of my maybe my normal self, or I feel inspired again to do it, I'll do it. I'm
Nice.
like, but like right now I'm not producing quality at all. I'm producing something so horrible. I'm like I'm not loving them. Every time I was making like a new prototype, I'd
Yeah.
start to like it, and then you're kind of like looking at it. You're like, I don't like this. Like I don't like it anymore.
Hmm.
And
Sounds
like
like
that,
your inner critic was getting louder and louder.
yeah. And it was really bad. Probably like I want to say probably over like a year ago, year and a half ago. I said like, okay, I'm gonna put this off, and because I even tried like other business ventures too, but I never really realized like I was overworking. So like I would start to do something. I was like, oh, I hate this because my inner critic was so bad at that time that I now tell people I'm like, well, now running my personal training business, I'm like, I will not like I have to set boundaries. I was like, and you should set boundaries in your business when you're running a business. And even from like your day job in general, I'm like, set those boundaries because if you don't, you're going to overwork yourself and you're not going to be happy. I was like, something's going to tank,
Hmm.
whether it's you or your business or both.
Nice. And now today, are you feeling better about whatever balance you've achieved? How's that going?
I mean, I still think there's a lot of work to be done because I still work a lot, but I still try to set the boundary of like like, because I used to like get up in the morning and check my phone to see if there was new emails or see if there was like new orders coming through or just like even like the content in general, like see if people reacting to it. I would get up first thing in the morning and do that. Well, for one, that's not probably good when you're just waking up
I was gonna
because
say
you're like you're
email before
tired.
coffee is bad news.
Yeah, I am like I now like I love coffee. I'm like I need to drink my coffee before I post anything, before I do anything, because
Hmm.
for one, like I would look at my phone, I would answer a message, and it would be like, but like it'd be through like Snapchat, and you'd look and like they can see when you read the message. So it's like, dang it, now I have to answer when I'm half awake. So like, or you're kind of seem like you would have to explain that you just got out of bed. So yeah, that's what I've come to learn is balance what you're doing. Like even if you are gonna work a lot too, you're find somewhere to balance and have those relaxing moments. So
Yeah, I can relate.
let's see, what's your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, okay. Okay, I had a couple of like professional pivots that at times I've characterized as failures, but like through a lot of therapy and retelling, I decided they're not actually failures. So like freshman year in conservatory, and I transferred out, went to Brown University, got a quote regular degree. Not a failure, but at the time I was like, I failed music school. Does that make sense to you? Uh,
Yeah,
Similarly, when I had a job early on in my career as a cantor, a music minister, my first ever full time job, I believe objectively I did pretty well. I ended up not staying there beyond 2 years. I was essentially pushed out in a rather ugly way. And I came to learn after the fact that this is a synagogue that churns through clergy. Like, no one lasts more than 3 or 4 years. And it's unfortunate because those are real people who are made to feel rather terrible that they couldn't do it right or something. So at the time, again, I felt like a failure, even though looking back on it and with lots of therapy and reassurance from my loved ones, I didn't do badly. It was just a place that was unworkable. But I did think of a real failure, Kayla. Um, Shortly after I finished graduate school, I decided, so I went to seminary to become a cantor, again a music minister in the Jewish synagogue. I went for 5 years of school, and that got me the cantor degree and also master's in sacred music. So a lot of school. And as I was coming down the home stretch, I was like, I don't think I want to be a pulpit cantor for various reasons I don't really want to go into now. But I was like, I'm just not going to do it. And I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? I had to pay rent. I had to do something. So I had like some knowledge about gardening. And I was like, I'm going to start a gardening business in New York City. I had no official horticultural training. I was like a pretty good hobby gardenist, not a landscaper. I had really poor business skills. Um, I think I tried hard, but I was kind of clumsy in all kinds of ways. And within a few months, it was clear that it wasn't sustainable. Certainly not. I wasn't making enough money to, quote, make a living as a sole proprietor business owner. And man, oh man, that was a real failure of a business. It's kind of embarrassing. And then I found a music job, and I've been kind of working in the education world ever since. I'll tell you, Kayla, sometimes when I see landscapers or even my buddy who happens to be in the tree business, I kind of get like not whimsical, nostalgic, and I'm like, oh, working outside, that sounds wonderful. But I also recognize a lot of that work is really physically demanding, and my 43-year-old body would not love 40 hours in the sun. I mean, I'd have a good tan, but I think it would kick my body's tush. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like even working in the heat, I don't know how people do that. I
I
don't
did that
even
2
like sometimes
summers
go.
roofing. It was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, here we had gotten like 102 like degree weather. Now, okay,
Are you
I
in the
know from
Southwest, Kayla? Where are you?
no, uh Portland, Oregon. So we don't get super hot weather. Yeah, we don't get super hot weather sometimes with
Oh, no
like
one
a
has
lot of
AC, right?
yeah, so we're not like I was telling someone I'm like you're like that's so hot. I'm like, well, yeah, we're not built with the infrastructure to
Right.
deal with like maybe Arizona heat because a few years ago we were getting like the really bad heat like that
Mhm.
like they would get in like Arizona or like maybe Texas like and it was so hot and they're like, well, do you even know what infrastructure is? I'm like, well, yeah, like the buildings and how things are built around here. I'm like, in certain places. No, and I'm like, so I Googled it. I was like, infrastructure. I'm like, I said it the not so fancy way of how Google said it, but I was like, we're just not built with it. I was like, that's not how. I'm like, if I went to Arizona, I'm like, I don't think I'd survive a day. I was like, it's too hot.
Yeah. I'm staying out of Arizona for all kinds of reasons. Present weather, one of many. Yeah, actually, fun fact about Portland, Kayla. My world premiere of the musical was a concert version at Reed College in Portland. This happened, I guess, about a year before the COVID pandemic hit. So the summer before that March.
Oh,
And it was at a Jewish conference hosted at Reed College. So that's my connection to Portland. Yay, Portland.
yeah, I mean, I love being here. But I prefer the rain over the heat. Like, cause even the last few days, it was hot, and then all of a sudden it just started pouring buckets of rain. Like at the end of August, and usually the end of August is like hot, like or not like super hot, but our type of normal like heat wave. I'm
Yeah.
like, and no, it was raining. I was like, this is pretty nice to walk outside and rain.
Yeah, I like rain when it's not cold. So we can
Yeah,
agree on
well,
that.
and then there was like thunderstorms the other day too. Like it was like at like 4 in the morning. I'm like listening. I'm like, what is that sound? It's thunderstorms.
Oh, this is weather that Portland's not used to, right?
Well, like we get thunderstorms, but I don't feel like we get them like the most frequently. Like it's not a day to day thing. Like I mean, I guess we get them more frequently than I guess some other places.
Yeah.
Like I don't know about like other states and like what they get, but we get like thunderstorms. I wouldn't say like every single day, like in the fall time or winter time.
Hmm.
Like we also don't really get. We're not used to like like blizzard type things either. Like we've gotten some in the past few years, like around like February, like our like maybe like 3 feet of snow maybe, where like people can't drive at all, and we're like shut everything down because we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know how to drive in that. Like my dad knows how to drive in it. Like he'll pretty much drive in anything.
Hmm.
But he also lived in like Missouri too, so like that obviously he would kind of know more probably about how
Yeah,
to
the
drive.
Midwest winters are no joke, or at least they used to be. I guess all of these so-called conventional wisdom about weather patterns are probably needing rapid revision, right?
Well, yeah, and even I remember last year it was like summertime hot until like the end of October. So it was like it was hot. I'm like because I usually like to be in sweatpants and a sweater because I'm like it's fall time. That's what it's time for. I'm like I regret my sweater because it's hot out here. I was
That's
like I
funny.
should have kept some shorts on or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to pay attention to that. I've got temperature regulation issues, so whether it's hot or cold, I always bring some sleeves just in case.
Yeah, because I always say September 1st. That's like sweatpants time. It's time for my hot chocolate from Starbucks. I'm like that's what it's time for. That was not the case last year. I was like it is still hot.
Am
This
I
is not
right
normal.
though? Portland, it's a good idea to have a raincoat just in case.
Yeah, most people say like have. I don't know like about you, but like people always say like you're not from Portland if you're carrying an umbrella. If you're carrying an umbrella, you're obviously not from Portland because we don't do that.
You just have raincoats and walk. I noticed that when I went to Holland and on a different trip, Copenhagen and Denmark, like I'm a bicycle fan. I don't bike as much now in my current sort of suburban environment, sad face. But when traveling, I love to bicycle. And those places are like bicycle paradises, Holland and Denmark both. No one uses an umbrella because that's ridiculous on the bike. So they just have like really great raincoats. And they talk about you don't bike because of good weather. You dress for the good weather and you bike. Or you dress for the weather and then you get on your bicycle. Like it's just no big deal. I kind of wish I was that hardy, but
Well, and even in Portland, we have like I think they're like the Nike bikes that you like rent, and obviously like you see like in
we have
Portland
bike
like
share bikes.
yeah,
Yeah.
those. Well, we have like the scooters too. I've seen people riding those scooters and leaving them around, but like you've seen I don't see it as much anymore, but you see people like riding their bikes, and like some of them are like it's not even like raincoats. It's like they could pretty much just be in like a t-shirt and like sweatpants, and they're like the rain. So then like it's like you don't really see that because like people always say like you don't need a raincoat. It's Portland. Like you go run out in the rain. Like my older sister and I used to go like run out when it was like pouring down rain, and we just go run around
So
outside.
frolic in the rain is like a real Portland thing.
Yeah, I feel like that's something at least me and her always did. Like, we would go run around, and we're like, and then our parents would ask, "Oh, what are you doing?" And we're like, "Oh, nothing. We were taking a shower because we'd be all drenched." Oh yeah, we were just showering. It's okay.
Yeah.
So
Here
that
in
that was something.
Maryland, I was just gonna mention here in Maryland, there's Maryland. If you look, it's got a really weird shape, and it's essentially an enormous estuary. The Anacostia River has like this huge estuary. There's another one where, anyway, it's just there's something about the geography of this region that some people liken to as a mega swamp. Like Washington, D.C. was built on a drained swamp. So half of that land is Maryland, right? And half of it was Virginia. So, like, there's this thing about this whole region where we get an afternoon thunderstorm between 3 and 5 p.m. most days of the week throughout the summer, between May and August. It's really weird. When I first moved to D.C. as a much younger man and started dating my now wife, I was like, what's with the afternoon rain? And she's like, oh, it's a thing in Washington, D.C. You'll notice. People who live here, they have a little umbrella. Because, so many D.C. people are like going to the Hill or going to lobbyist offices. Everyone's fancy, or a lot of them are. And you just learn that you're going to get drenched in the afternoon commute if you're not lucky. And I thought that was funny. Now when there's an afternoon thunderstorm, I'm like, oh, there we go. It kind of makes me nostalgic for when we first dated years ago. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see many people with umbrellas. Like my older sister will carry one. I'm like, we don't do that here. So I've heard.
No umbrellas in Portland. Noted.
Okay. Let's see. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Oh, my musical. Life Review,
Yeah.
the Hospice musical. Remember it.
Yeah, like I definitely think like I like to think like career wise. Well, what would you be remembered for? My
But I want
career.
to say yes, and Kayla, as soon as I said that, that was Ben the promoter. Ben the human being wants to be remembered as someone who was a loving father, husband, parent, friend, a dedicated teacher of music, a Jewish clergy person, and a chaplain who served the various Jewish communities, and a creative person who wrote beautiful songs and many musicals, I hope. I've just completed one, but I have several in the hopper, so I imagine and hope that I will be remembered as someone who did many musicals. There we go.
What's the best compliment you've ever gotten? Doesn't have to be career wise, or
well, for my creative work, someone said my dialogue reminded them of Neil Simon, who's one of the best comic playwrights who ever lived. And so I was pretty delighted by that praise. And you know, sometimes, you know, I've taught music to, at this point, probably over 1,000 kids over the years. They don't all go on to be musicians, but at this point, I sometimes hear from kids as they get a little older saying, I loved music with you, and now I'm doing ba ba ba. So that's a sort of more indirect compliment, but to hear that music time with me, whenever they learned in my music classes, was fun and inspirational enough that they went on to do more music and pursue their passion, that's a tremendous compliment.
I always think it's like I remember leaving my last job. I told I left a pretty I say it's a pretty toxic. My first job was relatively like toxic, at least in my standings of like, you know, just being told you're not good enough, and it was like, and it finally took me like after getting like my second job, it took me like 6 months to quit the first one. So it was definitely like a change of like, but I remember like quitting my second job to my now current job. And I remember just like thinking, because like I was still in that mindset of like, this is how like, you know, like big corporations are run. People are always like, well, we're not going to have someone who can do what you do. And it's like, it kind of made me realize like I made an impact on like, because I worked with like a bunch of like teenagers. So like I'm like, even though like I'm roughly in their same age range, it's like, I'm like, oh, I made an impact in your life. I was like, yeah, I'm like, that's kind of what I'm like that, you know, that felt pretty good. Just like, you know, especially being at like a low point in my life, I was like, oh, that actually feels pretty good.
It's important, even when you're struggling, to hear those kind words. It sounds like the young people who worked with you were really impacted by you, Kayla. Well done. I'm giving you a virtual high five. Ready for it? Do you know how to do this? Yes.
There we go. Yeah, so like sometimes you ever like go for a high five and you just like completely miss. It's like
mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why we rehearse, people. That's why we rehearse.
Yeah, I'll do that at work. Someone will go high five. Like, oh, and like you just get like the end of the hand. It's like, oops.
Oh wait, you're saying you have issues with your real life high fives? I thought we were still in the virtual high five. Sorry.
Well, sometimes, and even then too. Like you ever just like, even in life too. Because I'm like sometimes you mistime it, and it's like, oops.
Yeah, getting a little slapstick. There we go.
Okay, let's see. What has been your favorite job you've held?
Oh, I think I'm gonna say the 2 years that I worked for Two Check Roofing. Not a job I could plausibly continue beyond being a much younger man. I think I was hired when I was 19, and I worked on a flat roof crew. I'm now 43, full disclosure. But when I was 19, I worked on a flat roof crew. So think like a warehouse or a bank or a fast food place, kind of a boxy building with no slope. So you can walk around there, but it's still a roof and it needs to be replaced. So we had all kinds of crazy machines that like ripped it up, and then shovels, and it's just like intense physical work. There was crazy heavy things. At the time I was a college kid. I was, you know, hoping to like put on muscle and, you know, impress girls and be a good athlete and so forth. So I liked working hard, and, you know, my physique developed. I got a tan and all that. It was also kind of fun to get out of the bubble of like privileged smarty pants kids, because Northwestern, pretty fancy Midwestern school, and certainly when I landed at Brown, even more so. And so like it was a little bit rough and tumble. One of my foremen used to call me Ivy League derisively. But that said, like, I learned a lot about how to use tools, how to drive around big trucks, one summer I ran a hot tar kettle. It was a pretty crazy piece of machinery to operate. You know, with like propane tanks as tall as me, and the kettle cooked at 500 degrees with tar in it, and I had to like stir the tar like a big soup and scoop out the chunks and then close the lid, turn on the pump. You can see my face. I'm getting all animated because it was such a fun time. Even though it was hot as hell, even though it was dirty, because I ended every day like spent, at the end of the summer, I was as strong and as, self-assured as I'd felt ever in my life. So there's something about working on an all-male crew with your body all day that like probably pumps you full testosterone, for better or worse. And I think it didn't hurt that I was 19 and 20, which is kind of an exciting time to be a person, right? The last thing I should mention, other than all the physicality, I liked how it was a workplace almost entirely free of bullshit. Unlike the corporate world, and I'm afraid to say the synagogue, church world, and definitely the education world where you deal with parents, in the working world, it's often like, we have this job. Like, if you punch in at 6 or 6:30 or 7, whatever your time is, if you're on time 5 days a week, you're already better than like half or 3/4 of the staff. That's not to say that just showing up made the difference. Like, I also worked hard, but like, I had a clean license. I could follow multi-step directions, and I wasn't a total asshole. I never showed up hungover and reeking of alcohol. I was like an A+ employee. I wasn't as strong as some of the guys. I wasn't as experienced, like priming a pump, like to get a generator going or something like that. Like, that wasn't my skill set, but they were pretty happy with me. And I had other jobs when I was an even younger person, like working at a retail children's clothing store that had that similar aspect. Not so much like rough and tumble working class, but just like, here's your job, fold these 1,000 pairs of pants, and then tell me when you're done and do the next thing. And it's like relatively simple, like do your stuff and move on. I always appreciated that about those jobs.
Yeah, and even I think like, so I've worked a lot in like, and I guess not so much as experience as like some other people had, but I've worked in like, like fast food restaurants. So like,
Sure.
Coming into my new job, it was definitely, it's definitely, I think, a little bit easier. Like, they kind of just like tell you kind of like what to do per se, like, like the basic job guidelines of like, like interact with customers, make them their food, kind of like get them out of there. Like, just like it's fast service, but they also understand, like, it kind of more feels like they understand you're human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some people have problems, like if you're trying to like if you're trying to like wrap something and you're not the strongest at it. Like, for me, I'm starting to develop some carpal tunnel in my wrist, so it makes my job a little bit harder because like I'm like still like waiting for doctors to give me something that's actually gonna help. But it's definitely like, at least they kind of understand, like, okay, so your wrist hurts, so you're not gonna go as fast. It's like there are some things they understand, but like the previous jobs I've had, it was like, I remember my first one, it was just like they didn't seem to understand. Oh, well, you're human. Like, they're like, this is how this should be done, and it should only be done this way. And it was always like, and even like people I knew who had years experience, they weren't like the nicest like managers.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I took my management approach, like, because at my first job, I became a manager relatively quickly, like, not like within like 3 months, but like relatively quickly, like than most people I think would assume.
Mm-hmm.
I took like a different approach. I always say I take it like psychologically.
Yeah.
Like, if you're stressed out, your people are going to be stressed out, which makes your customer stressed out.
Totally.
Or, if someone's having a bad day, customers are going to be stressed out. Like, something like that. Like, I mean, you can't make everyone happy, but, like, take it from a psychological standpoint that's how someone's brain's wired, or someone's having a bad day. Or if they're overwhelmed, you're going to be overwhelmed. Like, it's like a pyramid per se. And I'm like, and I would tell people that, and it was like, no, I've had years experience, and like, and even now I still kind of get it, like, oh, you're young, you don't understand like what it's like. It's like, but I do. And it's like, sometimes like that, like cockiness kind of comes out of me. Like, like that young cockiness. It's like, okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, show me what you got. And it's like, and then they start struggling. I'm like, now you want my help? Now you want me to show you how to do it? So like that's what I do. I'm like, it's not like the right way to go about things, but sometimes it's like, oh, I'm too young. Okay, I'll show you what too young. What
I
you
think
think
when I
I'm.
got on the phone today, I definitely like verbalized a couple of jokes about your apparent youth and my apparent old age, but like, why? Because I wouldn't. It's interesting as you're bringing that up because one, I should know better, and two, I apologize if I was condescending for a moment. I didn't mean to be. And three, I've definitely done podcast interviews with people 20 years my senior, particularly older women, because I've done all these like nursing and hospice podcasts, and they all seem to be hosted by women who are 60 plus. Anyway, I would never get on the interview and be like, oh, you're 20 years older than me, right? But I totally felt like it was okay to be like, oh, you're young. And I need to interrogate that a little bit.
Well, even I witnessed it at work a few days ago. Like someone was saying like they're like, oh well, you're only like 22. Like 'cause when I'm like someone I worked with, he was only like a year older than me. They're like, oh well, you're only like 21, 22, and it's like, and like he would do back, well, you're only 3 years older than me, and it's just like I kind of witnessed that. I was like, like young people are like, it doesn't make me any incapable of actually working. I was like, I have experience just like you do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
yeah, the first sentence, you're only 22, full stop. Whether that's said by a 23-year-old or a 43-year-old or an 83-year-old, it's equally patronizing. I don't know why that is. I was thinking like there's a false conventional wisdom that says wisdom goes to the old and beauty goes to the young. And I think we think about our other selves. Like, I'm 43. I look pretty young. I often like go to a fantasy of being my 23-year-old self with that body and that sex drive and that level of freedom and all that, right? And I don't know about you, but I've met a lot of 20-somethings who are like, oh yeah, someday when I'm a grown-up, and they're talking about their fantasy 40-something self, and that 60-year-old host who relates to me and says, oh my God, you're so young. So I think a lot of that is, it's hard to feel totally comfortable in your current age and stage. And I think when we sit in that discomfort, we can then throw off the comments that are easily felt as patronizing or diminishing or demeaning. Like, I think a lot of those grown-ups may be threatened by the fact that you are both new and creative and thoughtful, and that creativity and thoughtfulness or insight doesn't only come to those who have been around the company for a decade or more. Does that track to you?
Yeah, and even like, so shortly after I turned 20, I started like playing like recreational soccer. So, and what I realized very quickly playing recreational soccer is a lot of the people are older than you, and they're probably in their maybe late 20s, 30s, 40s, and they think, for starters, and this is also what I've come to realize, and what I tell people like who want to start playing recreational soccer, because now I've been kind of like in and out of it for like almost 2 years now.
I think I know where the punchline is going, but bring it, Kayla.
They like some of these guys, and I actually had this experience like a few days ago, but some of them think they're like all that, like they're like some all-star player or something, and I'm like, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna get that in a lot of recreational sports.
Oh yeah.
Just in general. But even like, so my dad is like 53, and I decided, okay, I want to be in a little more competitive league, because I'm like, I've played for 2 years. I'm like, I'm ready for something a little more competitive. And I just got off like playing for like, so they have like different levels, obviously, like kind of like they do in like like professional soccer, like college soccer, like D1, D2. I just
Sure.
came up playing like a D3 team. So I said, okay, I'm like, I'll do like a D3 team and up. So anywhere from D1 to D3. So I found one very last minute, like D2. And I went to the first game and he tells me, I think it's too competitive for you. And I'm like, as I'm like analyzing my own performance in the game, I'm like, because that's where I come in, like where my brain works, like analytically, like I'm like looking, I'm like, okay, like what could have I done better on? Like just kind of like, I look at the game like from a tactical standpoint and not so much from a like physical, like that's just, I've kind of realized that's not how my game is played.
Okay.
Um, but he tells me, I think it's too competitive for you. I said, okay, but I was the one taking shots in the whole game. Like, I was shooting the ball. I was putting them under pressure while you were just standing there. And then I made the joke of like, what do you think? You're Messi?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he literally dead looked me in the eye and said, yes. I was like, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 53. I'm like, you're the same age as my dad. And my dad has never said that. And my dad trains with me. I'm like, my dad plays better than you. I was like, and my dad has never tried to say that. I'm like, yeah, he'll make jokes saying he's like the GOAT. But I'm like, and my dad has played in 2 games his whole life.
Uh-huh. Am I
I'm like,
hearing
and
like dude on your team or who was being skeptical about your ability
yeah,
might
like
have
he
been
was
expressing his
like,
own insecurities?
yeah, and also he was like, so like a lot of like recreational teams have their own like team managers,
Sure.
like because obviously it's recreational, and you're like obviously like, these people either like have the friends or they
Yeah.
have help making a team.
Right, right, right.
But
A little
he
bit of
like,
nepotism, hooking up your
yeah, he
friends
just like
rather than
he thought since he's played for so long, played recreational soccer for so long, he just thought he was like so good. I'm like, okay, but you dribble the ball, and I'm like, the difference between you and Messi is Messi can carry the ball and score a goal. I'm like, you weren't doing any of that. I was like, if you're gonna compare your game, don't compare it to him.
totally.
I was like, that's and because if you don't know Messi, like obviously like one of the best players in the world, and like obviously can carry that ball, and he very tactically smart, very just very smart. I'm like find a different player to compare your game to, and
Yeah.
then say that. But like I even told my dad, I said it was just it was rude. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like because I'm like who says that? I'm like if you're gonna like I'm like I told him I'm like I look at the game very tactically.
Yeah.
I'm like. But he also like let me and one other girl. We only played for like 20 minutes, and it was like
Right.
so. You just kind of see this shift of like, oh well, I've played a long time, or I just think I'm awesome.
Yeah.
And I've run into a few bad apples of those people like a few times. I'm like,
I think I I can't relate to being a young woman, but I can relate to the challenge of being new in a job. Um, I describe my professional life as having a lot of zigzags, like in the Jewish world as a cantor, working as a public school and charter school music teacher, doing Hebrew stuff, English language stuff, now playwright, now songwriter, performer, back to teaching. And so, like, every time I start a new job, even though I bring a pretty solid resume, I'm on some level a rookie, right? Like, last year, in year one of this new job, I went to new teacher training, and some of the stuff they told us, Kayla, was, let's say, familiar material. I didn't really need it, but I needed it because I was a new teacher, right? You, like, do the dance. Um, but sometimes it feels a little bit aggravating when people don't know who you are or what you know. But like, I guess that's part of starting each journey. Like the musical I created, our hero Rabbi David, his big problem is he's not very good at his job. He starts, and most of us are not rabbis who are chaplains, but any of us who watch that play can relate to the fact of wanting to do well at a job and then falling on your face. And that happens about 15 minutes in. He says something kind of awful to the mother of a dying child and just puts his foot in his mouth and he gets sent out in shame. It's really terrible. And then he sings his big I Wish song where he looks up to the heavens and says, God, help me out. Because he's at a loss. It kind of causes a crisis in faith. I think for a lot of us regular people, non-clergy people, we can relate to the feeling of being new in a job and wanting to make an impact, wanting to do well, but also kind of stumbling. And sometimes it's just a matter of walking that journey, to quote Jay-Z, brush that dirt off your shoulders, but like, and then continuing on with some kind of faith, right? Faith that it'll get better, faith that you'll grow through the journey and find your way. So there you have it.
Yeah, and even for me, like when I start new jobs, like I always have trouble with like, you know, like getting in my own head, like, oh, I'm not going to be very good for this job because I had a job like, and
Okay, like
it
you're
only,
great.
yeah, I had sometimes it is kind of hard to tell yourself that, like, but I remember like in between my first job and like my second job there, I had a little stint at a different job, and it was like for some reason I just had this like nagging feeling like that this was not gonna last. Like it was nagging. I mean, I've never had that. Like obviously I have like experience where like my intuition is really strong, but like this would not stop nagging at me. I was like, I'm not staying at this job for very long. I'm like something told me like they were gonna like fire me or something. Like I like to say like I am a good worker. Like, and that is something I do know bringing into place. Like I will obviously you pay me to work, so you don't
Yeah.
pay me just to kind of like not show up. I'm like you pay me to do a job. I'm like that's kind of how I've always thought of that. Like, but I'm like I saw that, and like I just like it wouldn't leave me alone. So I went to talk to them, and they like completely ghosted me. And I'm like, wow. So I was right. Like, but so luckily I hadn't put my 2 weeks in at my my prior job because that's what I was going to do. But somebody told me not to do that because I'm like, something's wrong with that. Like, but like they stopped talking to me like completely. Like that job I had, I was like, oh, okay. But
That's weird. Glad you
like
averted disaster though.
I was like, it was like super random. But I was like even like not so much my first job, but like my second job prior to kind of leaving my first job because I realized like the way they talked to me wasn't exactly like normal, like in a sense of like that's not how you talk to people in like in a work environment at all.
Not
But like
professional.
I remember just being super like anxious, like, oh, this is like, I'm like, they're not gonna like me because I'm not doing this right. And it took me a few weeks, but like after I got a routine down, it was like a lot easier.
Right. That makes sense.
So, and even like my job now, I'm like, it's like I struggled so hard the first 2 days. It was busy and stressful, and I'm like I don't think they're gonna like me. And I was like, but luckily I think they do. So at least I'd like to think they do. So I'm like, but I even remember telling someone, I said, if you're going to go in for a job interview, I was like, know what you bring to the table and let that shine. Don't let personal experiences like for previous jobs, shine through. I'm like, let what you know how to do shine through. Like, I was like, what you bring
Good
to the
advice.
table. That's what I did in like my previous job interview. I said, I'm like, this is what I bring to the table. This is what I know how to do. My experience. I'm like, I know the ins and outs. I'm like, and they liked it, but like that person didn't listen to me, and they were having so much trouble getting jobs. I said, well, you're not bringing your experience to the table and saying, like, I know what I bring to the table. So
That's tough. That's tough. Working with, sounds like that colleague wasn't pulling their weight or doing what they needed to do, and it can be really tricky. I mean, I sometimes liken professional pairings as like arranged marriages, especially if it's a small company. Like my last synagogue job, I did pretty good work. My main colleague who I worked with, my fellow clergy partner, she and I did not mesh well. So it was a bad arranged marriage, and it was like deeply uncomfortable. And sadly, it made it difficult for me to shine professionally. I ultimately chose to make a move and go in a different direction. But it was disappointing to realize that, because sometimes you can bring your best self to a job and yet there's still other things going on, including individuals who are difficult or just not doing what they need to do. You know, if to use that rowing metaphor, like if we're not all rowing at the same time in the same direction, it's just going to be like spinning around. Or if someone's just hanging there, not lifting up their oar, they're just kind of slowing down the boat. And that's not a good feeling to have at work. One thing that makes me happy about back to school, you know, some teachers are really depressed this time of year, but if they're in good schools, they're like, yay, back to school. So I'm like, yay, back to school, because I like a lot of the teachers I work with. And I feel like we are all contributing to a nice, happy place where kids are doing well for themselves. So that's a good feeling.
All right, and I'm gonna kind of end it here.
Perfect.
But so you said you had some live music you wanted to share.
Sure.
I've been trying to keep it in the back of my mind so I didn't forget.
Yeah, I'd love to sing a song for you, Kayla. I'll do. I know the iPad didn't have juice. So the moment of truth is how tuned is my guitar. You've seen it in the background, folks. It's a real background. It's not virtual. See, look at that. Whoa. Now let's see. Oh yeah, praise. When you haven't, Kayla, do you happen to play guitar?
I've tried.
So you know,
I'm not very good.
Stay in tune, especially not in Portland and other humid environs. I'm gonna pull up my music stand. I think I'm gonna share a song that's like a little mellow. It's from the musical, and it's a lullaby. But it's a unique kind of lullaby. It's late in the play when our main character, the chaplain, is visiting with his friend, whose name is Leroy, and he says, Leroy, I want to say hello, and Leroy replies, Rabbi, I'm feeling tired. And so Rabbi David offers to play him a lullaby to help him fall asleep. Leroy nods weakly, and he smiles in the most subtle way. Rabbi David sits near the bed and plays the following song. Lay on back, rest your head. Lay thee down, safe in bed. Close your eyes, darling dear. You drift away, I'll stay right here. Time to sing a lullaby. Sing a soft, sincere goodbye. Tuck you in for a dream so sweet, heaven awaits, your life's complete. Hold your hand, wipe your tear, kiss your face, soothe your fear. You are holy, your life's been blessed. Now, my love, it's time to rest. Time to sing a lullaby. Sing a soft, sincere goodbye. Tuck you in for a dream so sweet, heaven awaits, your life's complete. So rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
I don't have any coffee emojis or sound effects there.
Thanks, Kayla.
All right. So what was the name of your musical again? Sorry, I
Called
almost forgot how to
Life
say music.
Review, the Hospice Musical. The website
Okay.
is lifereviewmusical.com. Instagram at lifereviewmusical. And if you liked what you heard today, you want to learn more, check out the website. There's a great trailer. You can be in touch if you want to contact me and message me on Instagram, whatever. I'd be happy to hear from you. And Kayla, thanks for the opportunity to chat. It was a great conversation, and much love to Portland. That was where the world premiere of Life Review happened. What a coincidence.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show. If you ever want to come back, you can just message me. My Facebook stays pretty much the same. I know I don't post on it, so.
It's all good, Kayla. I appreciate it so much, and thanks for the conversation. It's been a joy. Take care.
Yeah.